truly happens behind closed doors. Yet, the discovery he makes will shatter his entire world. At the center of it all is a courageous housemaid who risks her own livelihood to protect the children from harm. And when the billionaire finally reveals his true identity before everyone, the truth erupts with the force of a tidal wave. You will be captivated by how this tale of vengeance, love, and ultimate justice reaches its unforgettable conclusion. Before we continue with the story, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this video, and tell us in the comments what part of the world you're watching from. The heavy garden shears trembled in Jackson Thompson's hands as he gazed through the kitchen window, his heart pounding. His new wife, Olivia, stood like a storm in the middle of the bright marble kitchen, her face contorted with a chilling anger. "You foolish girl," she hissed, her voice sharp as glass, shoving 6-year-old Sophie against the counter so hard it made the little girl gasp. "How many times must I tell you? The table is to be set before breakfast, not a single moment after." Sophie's small hands clutched her arm where it had slammed against the stone edge. Her wide blue eyes shimmered with tears she fought desperately to hold back. Behind her, 2-year-old Hunter sat on the floor beside his toy blocks, watching everything unfold in a state of quiet confusion. "Don't just stand there," Olivia snapped at her. "Pick that up. Both of you are just alike, lazy and completely spoiled. Your father works like a dog to keep this house, and you can't manage to do one simple thing right." Outside, crouched low behind the flower beds, Jackson struggled to catch his breath. For 2 weeks, he had been living covertly in his own mansion, under the disguise of a gardener. 2 long weeks of pretending to be a complete stranger in the home he'd built with his own hands for his children. It had been 2 weeks since he'd told Olivia he was leaving town for a business trip that would last a month. This was a ruse supported by an actor he had hired to take his phone calls and impersonate him. "If you dare to disobey me again, you will go to your bed without any dinner," Olivia stated sharply. "Do you understand me?" Sophie nodded, her gaze fixed on the floor. "Good. Perhaps a bit of hunger will finally teach you some manners." Olivia then pivoted and stormed from the kitchen, the sound of her heels clicking angrily against the tile. She almost ran directly into Jackson, who was busy trimming the hedges just outside the glass door. "Watch where you're going," she snarled. "Can't you see I'm walking here?" "I am terribly sorry, ma'am," Jackson offered in a quiet voice, keeping his head bowed. She gave him a dismissive once-over, from his worn-out boots to his faded denim shirt. "People of your sort always assume you can get away with anything. I trust Emily isn't paying you a fortune for this abysmal work. Just look at these hedges. They're completely crooked. I'll see to them right away, ma'am." "You'd better," she scoffed before striding away. This all began 2 weeks before, In a chic downtown Los Angeles office that smelled of rich coffee and leather, the man they now called Jackson sat across from his longtime friend and attorney. "Owen Hayes, you are certifiably insane," Owen, his lawyer, said bluntly, putting down his mug. "You want to go undercover as a gardener at your own estate? This isn't some kind of movie, my friend. It's the only way I can discover the truth." "What you're proposing is illegal," Owen warned him. "You could find yourself in serious legal jeopardy. We're talking invasion of privacy, deception. It can't be an invasion if it's my own house," Owen Hayes interrupted. His lawyer let out a weary sigh, rubbing his temples. "Explain it to me. What is happening?" Owen Hayes stared out the window at the LA skyline, which was bathed in the glow of the March sunlight. "It's the kids," he confessed softly. "Something's not right. Sophie used to run to greet me every single evening. These days, she hides behind the couch whenever I walk in. Hunter hardly utters a word in her presence. And as for Olivia, she's a different person. Cold, and with an iron grip on everything." Owen leaned in closer. "Are you saying you think she's harming them?" Jackson paused, the words catching in his throat. "Just last week, Sophie told me something that's been haunting me," she said. "When Daddy is away, the rules change." When I tried to ask her what she meant by that, she just clammed up, claimed she was just mixed up. But I saw it in her eyes, Owen. Pure terror. A deep frown creased Owen's brow. "Why not just confront her?" Owen suggested. "And say what? That I have a bad feeling? She'd just dismiss me like I was crazy." "So, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to uncover the truth," Jackson declared. "If it turns out I'm imagining things, then so be it. But if I'm right," his voice grew cold as steel, "then I will finally do what I should have done from the very start. I'm going to protect my children." He spent the next 3 days setting his plan in motion. He found a local actor down on his luck, a man named Noah Bennett, to place a few short phone calls to Olivia, impersonating him. Next, he acquired a convincing fake beard, a simple cap, and a pair of faded jeans, along with some well-worn work boots from a second-hand store. Later, as he examined his reflection in the mirror, he could hardly believe the stranger staring back at him. His subsequent conversation with Olivia about the supposed business trip was strained, to say the least. "An entire month?" she questioned, her tone laced with more curiosity than sorrow. "Is that truly essential?" "The investors out in New York insist on going over every single detail in person," he explained, sticking to his story. He explained. "Besides, you can't just be flying back and forth. The cost would be astronomical." She offered a slow, measured nod, and Jackson was certain he saw a flicker of something in her eyes. It was relief. "The children will miss you," she said, her tone completely flat. "Please, take good care of them." "Of course," she replied with a thin smile. "You can certainly count on me." Later that very night, while he was going through the motions of packing for a trip he would never take, he overheard her speaking on the phone. "Yes, he'll be gone for a full month," she whispered conspiratorially. "Finally, I can get things around here back under my control." The very next morning, the gardener showed up at the house. Emily, the maid they had hired just 3 weeks earlier, opened the back door for him. She looked to be around 28 years old. Her brown hair was pulled back into a tidy ponytail, and her eyes were warm, yet held a hint of caution. "You must be the new gardener," she said in a pleasant voice. "Yes, ma'am." "My name is Robert," Jackson replied, purposefully making his voice a little deeper. "I'm Emily. Mrs. Whitmore informed me that you were starting today." She then guided him through the list of his responsibilities, from trimming the rose bushes to cleaning out the fountain. And as she spoke, he studied her mannerisms carefully. She was respectful, but also firm, and not at all servile. There was something about her kindness that felt completely genuine, a quality that was exceptionally rare in that household. At the exact moment he stepped outside, Olivia strode into the kitchen. "This is the gardener," Emily explained. Olivia's eyes swept over him with a quick, dismissive glare. "I certainly hope he's an improvement on the last one. That man was completely useless." "I'll do my best, ma'am," Jackson replied, his voice barely a whisper. "You had better. I have zero tolerance for incompetence." For hours on end, Jackson toiled in absolute silence, the unfamiliar tools raising painful blisters on his soft hands. And yet, the raw physical sting was nothing compared to the profound ache of observing his own home as an outsider, of being forced to play the part of a stranger in the world of his very own children. Sometime around mid-morning, the glass door slid open. 6-year-old Sophie emerged onto the patio, clutching her little brother's hand tightly. Hunter toddled right beside her, his steps unsteady, but full of purpose. "Who is that?" Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. "That's the new gardener," Emily answered with a gentle tone. "His name is Robert." Sophie tilted her head to one side, studying him with innocent curiosity. "Where is Mr. Miguel?" "He's taken another job," Emily explained softly. Jackson kept his gaze fixed firmly on his work, feigning intense focus on the rose bush he was trimming. Hearing his daughter's sweet voice address him like a stranger instead of calling him Daddy cut deeper than any thorn. "Good morning," he managed to murmur, his voice thick with emotion. "Good morning," Sophie replied shyly, while Hunter offered a little wave. His tiny hand balled into a small, determined fist. Then, just as they had appeared, they turned and went back inside. Jackson watched as his little girl's shoulders slumped with a heaviness no child should carry. The cheerful laughter that once echoed through this yard had completely vanished, replaced by an unsettling and profound silence. Around noon, Emily emerged with a glass of water and a sandwich for him. "I figured you might be hungry," she said quietly. "Thank you," he replied, caught off guard by her kindness. They sat in the shade together, beneath the sprawling oak tree, the very same one he had planted on the day Sophie was born. "Have you been in this line of work for a long time?" she asked. "It's honest labor," he answered non-committally. "And you? Family?" he ventured. "Divorced?" He lied smoothly. "No kids," he added with a practiced shrug. "Life doesn't always unfold the way we map it out." A faint, melancholic smile touched Emily's lips. "The children are good. They're sweet. They're just so quiet." "Quiet?" he repeated carefully, his heart pounding. She paused. "Maybe I'm just seeing things that aren't there." Forget I said anything. But Jackson saw it plain as day in her eyes, a deep and genuine concern. That was the moment he knew his intuition was screaming the truth. Something sinister was casting a shadow over that home. By the third day, Jackson's disguise had started to feel less like a costume and more like a second skin. The earthy smell of damp soil and fertilizer seemed permanently embedded in his hands. His back throbbed from leaning over the flower beds, but that physical pain was a whisper compared to the agony in his chest. It was the soul-crushing helplessness of witnessing his children exist in a state of quiet terror. Later that afternoon, as the sun began to dip, Sophie and Hunter arrived home from their separate days at preschool and daycare. Olivia intercepted them in the kitchen. Jackson, who was trimming the hedges just beyond the window, could overhear every single chilling word. "And how was your day?" Olivia inquired, her voice laced with a sickening sweetness. "Good," Sophie replied in a small voice. "Good what?" Sophie blinked, confused. "Good, ma'am." "Now, try that again." Sophie's lower lip quivered. "Good, Mrs. Thompson. That's much better. Now, take your brother upstairs and ensure he keeps his hands off everything." "Yes, Mrs. Thompson." Jackson's blood ran cold. His own children had never spoken with such formality. They had always called everyone by their first name, even the household staff. Olivia was turning them into strangers in their own home. About an hour later, the sound of Hunter's soft cries drifted down the hall. Jackson glanced up from his work on the bushes, catching sight of the little boy as he toddled out of the kitchen, clutching his beloved stuffed elephant. Olivia emerged just seconds behind him, her voice as sharp and cold as ice. "What have I told you about dragging that disgusting toy all over this house?" She snapped at him, ripping it from his small hands. Hunter let out a whimper, his little arms reaching for it. "It's dirty." "You are not a baby anymore." With a flick of her wrist, she tossed it into the trash can. Hunter immediately burst into uncontrollable sobs. Jackson's knuckles turned white as he gripped the pruning shears. His son was barely 2 years old. He still clung to that stuffed elephant as he slept, a nightly ritual he hadn't missed since his mother passed away. Olivia was fully aware of this, but she couldn't have cared less. Just then, Emily entered the room quietly, a dish towel in her hand. "Mrs. Thompson," she began, her voice soft, "I can wash that toy for him, if you'd like." "It's very easy to clean." Olivia whipped around, her eyes narrowing dangerously. "Did I at any point ask for your opinion?" "No, ma'am," Emily answered, choosing her words with extreme care. "Then mind your own business. You are the help, not the mother." Emily lowered her gaze to the floor. "Yes, ma'am." The moment Olivia turned her back, Emily crouched down beside Hunter, whispering something in his ear that Jackson couldn't make out. The little boy's crying began to soften as she gently dried his tears. A turbulent mix of fury and thankfulness washed over Jackson. Someone was discreetly trying to shield his children, courageously, right there, under that oppressive roof. That evening, back in the dingy motel room where he hid under an assumed name, Jackson painstakingly pulled off the fake beard and gazed at the man in the mirror. The adhesive left angry red marks across his skin, but what truly stung was the memory of what he had seen. He pulled out his phone and began scrolling through old pictures. There was Sophie at her first dance recital, and Hunter on his 2nd birthday. Both of his kids were grinning from ear to ear, their cheeks sticky with birthday cake frosting. Now, those smiles were completely gone. His phone buzzed to life on the table. It was Olivia calling. He allowed the phone to chime twice before finally accepting the call. "Hello, sweetheart." Her voice was a velvet purr. "How are the meetings treating you? Long days, I imagine?" "Long days," he replied, "but we're making progress." "Good. Everything on the home front is perfect. The children are at last learning some discipline." "Discipline?" he questioned, the word tasting strange. "They've become so quiet, so respectful. You would be incredibly proud." He could practically feel the smug satisfaction radiating through the phone. It was the sound of absolute control, masquerading as household order. "I'm glad to hear it," he managed, his voice carefully neutral. "When you return, you'll find they've changed immensely, all for the better." "Better?" he echoed under his breath. "Right." The moment the call ended, Jackson sank onto the edge of the bed, enveloped in a crushing silence. "Changing," she had said, "for the better?" No, he realized with a cold certainty. They're not changing. They're breaking. The very next morning, long before the sun rose, he slipped back towards the mansion. As he cut across the dew-covered back lawn, he caught the sound of raised voices from an upstairs window. Olivia's sharp with anger, and Sophie's trembling with fear. He moved silently, positioning himself just beneath the window to Sophie's bedroom. A sliver of light escaped the curtains, just enough for him to peer inside. Inside, Olivia loomed over the small child's bed, the heavy comforter violently yanked halfway to the floor. This bed is an absolute disgrace. Do you honestly believe this is how a proper young lady maintains her room? I tried. Sophie's voice was barely a whisper. Then you will try again. Sophie scrambled to pull the weighty blanket taut across the mattress, her small arms straining, her small hands struggling awkwardly with the sheet corners. That's not how you do it, Olivia snapped. You're completely useless if you can't even handle a simple task like making a bed. Silent tears streamed down Sophie's face, but she kept working meticulously until it was flawless. There, that's acceptable. Next time, get it right from the start. As soon as Olivia had exited the room, Jackson watched Hunter wander in, clutching his comfort blanket. Sophie dropped to her knees, pulling her brother into a fierce embrace. "It's all right," she murmured, her voice a nearly inaudible whisper. "It's going to be all right." Jackson pressed his head against the wall, trembling with a silent fury. His every instinct urged him to charge in and end her cruelty. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not without the evidence he needed. During breakfast, he made a show of trimming the bushes just outside the dining room window. Olivia heaped her own plate with a generous portion of scrambled eggs, bacon, and several pieces of toast. She served Sophie less than half of that amount, and gave Hunter nothing more than a small cup of milk and a single slice of dry bread. "That is plenty," she announced curtly. "May I please have a little more?" Sophie asked in a small voice. "I am still hungry." Olivia's fork clattered as she slammed it down. "What are you trying to do? Get fat? Is that your goal? Children who stuff themselves are a disgrace to their family." Sophie recoiled as if she had been struck, slumped back into his seat. "No, Mommy." "Then you will eat what I've given you." At that moment, Emily appeared silently in the doorway. "Mrs. Thompson, I could easily prepare something more for the little one. He's only 2 years old." Olivia spun around to face her. "Are you questioning my ability to care for my own children?" "No, ma'am, of course not," Emily replied in a rush. "Good. Because if you wish to remain employed here, you will learn to remember your place." Jackson's grip on the hedge trimmer tightened until his knuckles ached. The sound of his son's soft whimpers for more food was seared into his mind. The second Olivia had left the room, Emily slipped back in, carrying a small plate of fruit, which she placed beside the children. "You must eat this quickly," she whispered urgently. "Don't let her see you." Jackson watched it all through the window, a painful lump forming in his throat. This woman, a complete stranger he had hired to clean his home, was risking her entire job to ensure his children did not go hungry. And a realization dawned on him. Emily wasn't simply a kind person. She was courageous. Later on that afternoon, while Jackson was clearing the garden path behind the house, Emily came outside holding a watering can. "The roses are absolutely beautiful," she commented softly, casting a nervous glance back towards the house windows. "Those were always Sophie's favorite," he answered, his voice dropping to a whisper. "She's such a sweet little girl," Emily murmured, her expression clouded with concern. "But she looks terrified." Jackson slowly turned his head to face her. "Have you seen anything out of the ordinary?" Emily paused, her gaze flicking anxiously toward the house. "Sometimes a person's true colors show when their spouse isn't looking." "What are you trying to say?" "Some people are masters of public perception." She chose her words with care. "But behind closed doors, they unleash their frustrations on those who can't fight back." A heavy, knowing silence hung between them as their eyes met. She never had to speak Olivia's name. It wasn't necessary. Jackson gave a slight, solemn nod. "You're right. A child should never have to walk on eggshells in their own home." Emily let out a trembling breath. "No, they never should." Later that night, as he lay sleepless, staring at the cracks in the motel ceiling, Jackson whispered a promise into the darkness. "I'm coming for you, my babies. Just hang on a little longer." By the end of the second week, Jackson could no longer distinguish which pain was worse. The searing ache in his hands from the tools, or the piece of his heart that fractured with each passing day. Olivia's cruelty had become a precise and methodical routine, feeling almost rehearsed. Each morning, she would invent a new reason to find fault. A toy not put away, a wrinkle on a bedsheet, a stray crumb on the kitchen floor. Every minor infraction became a justification for her harsh discipline. Emily began to take matters into her own hands, working in the shadows to protect the children. She no longer engaged in direct confrontations with Olivia. That was a lesson she had learned the hard way, as it only made things worse. Instead, she carved out small moments of grace for them, carefully hiding extra snacks for Hunter just inside the pantry door. She'd slip a soft, warm blanket onto Sophie's bed after Olivia had ordered her to sleep without one as a cruel punishment. From his quiet perch in the garden, Jackson saw it all. One sun-drenched afternoon, Olivia held her weekly brunch for the neighborhood ladies. 3 women from the area arrived, sporting designer sunglasses and smiles that never reached their eyes. The kind of people who treated personal stories as currency. "Children, come and say hello to my friends," Olivia's voice trilled from the terrace. Sophie appeared at the top of the staircase, her small hand firmly holding Hunter's. She was wearing a pale dress with a ribbon tied far too tightly around her small waist. Hunter tottered beside her, still finding his balance. "Aren't they just adorable?" one of the women gushed. "They look like 2 little angels," remarked another. "Yes, Olivia said, swelling with pride. They're finally learning how to conduct themselves. A little bit of discipline can work miracles. She ushered the children closer, parading them like trophies. Show the ladies how perfectly you can behave. Sophie's gaze flickered toward the women as she spoke in a hushed tone. Good afternoon, she murmured. Louder, Olivia commanded. Sophie repeated, her voice a little more clear. Good afternoon. Better, Olivia conceded with a thin smile. Working on the hedges nearby, Jackson felt his jaw clench with suppressed rage. Years ago, he had poured his heart into designing this very terrace. He'd chosen every detail: the gleaming white marble, the meticulously kept plants, and the serene sound of the central fountain. Now, it served as nothing more than a stage for this public humiliation. After 10 minutes of forced and hollow conversation, Olivia waved the children away as if they were an inconvenience. Go upstairs now and remain silent. The adults are having a conversation. Yes, Mrs. Thompson, Sophie answered softly, as she gently guided Hunter away. The instant they were gone, one of the women chuckled. You're quite the disciplinarian, Olivia. My little girl would never have the patience to stand still for that long. That's only because you let her run amok, Olivia replied, her voice dripping with pride. Children thrive on structure and a firm hand, and clear rules. Without them, they grow up to be frail. Jackson felt his grip on the pruning shears tighten until his knuckles ached. Every single word she uttered felt like a personal insult. Later that afternoon, he happened upon Olivia inside Sophie's room. She was ransacking the child's drawers, muttering furiously, So messy. It's always utterly messy. Then, upon finding a small stuffed bunny hidden under the bed, she held it up as though it were evidence in a trial. You are much too old for this, she sneered at Sophie, standing frozen in the doorway. That's mine, she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. Not any longer, Olivia declared, tossing it into the trash without a second glance. Do you want to cry? By all means, go ahead. Your tears have no power over me. Sophie didn't make a sound. She just stood there, a statue of trembling fear. Emily arrived just then, her hands balled into fists. Mrs. Thompson, please, I'm begging you. She is only 6 years old. Olivia pivoted slowly. Do you enjoy having this job, Emily? Yes, ma'am. Then you should remember, it is not your place to interfere with me. Am I not making myself clear? Olivia snapped. The very next time you step out of line, you will be gone. Emily's eyes connected with Sophie's for a heartbreaking second. A silent message of support. Then she turned and walked away, defeated. That evening, inside his stark motel room, Jackson chronicled every disturbing detail he had witnessed inside a small notebook. Day 14. She threw away Sophie's only toy, made threats against Emily. The children are barely eating. Sophie's eyes are empty. He knew the time for observation was over. He had to collect hard proof. He went out and purchased a miniature digital recorder and concealed it in a pocket beneath his gardener's work shirt. The very next morning, as Jackson was raking leaves near the kitchen window, he caught the sound of Olivia's voice. It was quiet, chilling, and laced with poison. "And what is this supposed to be, Sophie?" The child's voice was shaking. "It's my drawing." "A drawing of what?" Sophie paused, her fear palpable. "Of Mommy." "Mommy?" Olivia let out a sharp, cruel laugh. "That's not me." "No, my real Mommy," came the small voice, followed by a loud, slapping sound, not of a hand against skin, but the brutal tear of paper being ripped apart. "Your real mother is gone," Olivia stated, her voice cold as ice. "You will show me respect now." Jackson felt his stomach clench into a knot. He could so clearly picture his late wife's smile mirrored on Sophie's face. It was a gentle, patient smile, one that radiated pure love. And here was Olivia, actively trying to extinguish even the memory of it. He willed himself to keep working, even as hot tears began to blur his vision. He needed to capture every word she said. That very night, the hidden recorder picked up Olivia's voice with perfect clarity through the open kitchen window. "They're finally behaving themselves," she cooed into the phone. "Fear is a far more effective tool than love, you know? Love just makes children rotten." Jackson sat in his car, listening to the playback. His grip so tight, his knuckles turned white. Each recorded word was another piece of proof that would seal her fate. 2 days later, Olivia backed Emily into a corner in the kitchen. "I've been noticing something rather strange," Olivia began, her tone dangerously calm. "You have a habit of appearing right when I'm in the middle of disciplining the children." Emily froze completely, a dish towel still clutched in her hand. "I'm just trying to help keep the house running, Mom." "Are you?" Olivia challenged, stepping menacingly closer. "Or are you attempting to undermine my authority as a parent?" "Never," Emily responded, her voice soft but firm. "My only concern is for the well-being of the children." "What's best?" Olivia snarled, stepping closer to her. "Is for you to remember exactly who signs your paycheck." Emily swallowed hard, her composure faltering for a moment. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Because if I have the slightest suspicion that you're turning my stepchildren against me, I will personally make it impossible for you to ever work in this city again." She spun around and departed, the sharp sound of her heels echoing across the tiled floor. Concealed in the garden, Jackson had heard every venomous word, and his own pulse was thundering in his ears. The way Emily bravely held back her tears, refusing to back down even when threatened, stirred a powerful mix of fury and deep admiration within him. At lunchtime, she brought him his customary sandwich and water, but her familiar, warm smile was noticeably absent. They sat beneath the sprawling oak tree, wrapped in a heavy silence for several moments before she spoke. "May I tell you something of a personal nature?" she asked tentatively. "Of course," he said, his voice gentle. "I once had a position in a home where the father was a harsh man," she confided, her voice dropping to a near whisper. "He would scream at his son over every minor infraction. I held my tongue because I desperately needed the employment. Later, I found out the boy was sent to live with his grandmother after things got much worse. From that day on, I made a solemn vow to never allow myself to remain silent again." Jackson gazed at her, feeling a profound tightness in his throat. No one should be forced to choose between their conscience and their livelihood. "I'm past the point of caring," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "A child's home should be their sanctuary, not a place of fear." What I heard next would change everything. An overwhelming urge to tell her the whole truth washed over Jackson, to reveal his true identity and the real reason for his presence. But he knew he couldn't. The timing wasn't right. As Emily raised her eyes, a faint smile touched her lips. "You know, you remind me of someone," she said. "My father, actually. He was a man of few words, but when he did speak, people always listened. For what felt like the first time in ages, a genuine smile formed on Jackson's face. He sounds like a truly good man." "He was," she affirmed softly. "He believed that kindness was the greatest form of strength." That night, sleep was an impossible luxury for Jackson. He replayed every single moment. Emily's quiet courage, Olivia's casual malice, and his own children's silent resilience. He knew his time as a passive observer was rapidly drawing to a close. Soon, he would have to make his move. But before that, he needed irrefutable proof and the perfect opportunity to reveal his true self. He whispered a promise into the darkness. "Just hold on a little longer. Sophie, hold on, Hunter. Daddy is almost there." Those words echoed in my mind. The following days felt like the final, tense moments of a countdown. Each sunrise seemed to carry more weight than the last. Jackson was awake long before the first light of dawn, already clad in his gardener's disguise, anticipating the moment he could finally let the facade crumble. He wouldn't have to wait much longer. That very Friday morning, an unnatural stillness had settled over the house. There were no cartoons echoing from the living room, no giggles, no familiar sounds of breakfast being made. There was only Olivia's piercing voice reverberating down the hallway. "You have the audacity to call this clean?" she shrieked. "This bed is an absolute disgrace." Jackson stood frozen outside of Sophie's window. Through the pane of glass, he watched his 6-year-old daughter standing beside her little bed. The sheets were pulled taut, but they weren't flawless. I tried my best, Mrs. Thompson, Sophie stammered, her voice trembling. Then try harder. You're 6 years old, not incapable. Olivia violently ripped the blanket off the bed and flung it to the floor. Do it again, from the start. Sophie's small hands were shaking as she tucked each corner with care. Hunter watched everything from the doorway, clutching his security blanket. When Olivia's cruel gaze fell upon him, he let out a whimper. And what are you gawking at? Get yourself downstairs before you're the next one in line. Jackson's grip on the window frame tightened until his knuckles were bone white. Every single fiber of his being screamed at him to burst in there, but he forced himself to remain motionless. He needed her to expose her monstrous nature in front of another witness. Down at breakfast, Olivia sat with her posture perfect. A warm cup of coffee held delicately in her hand. She had piled her own plate with a mountain of pancakes, the syrup shimmering invitingly under the kitchen light. By contrast, Sophie's plate held a single small pancake. Hunter's was given just a half. That is plenty, she announced with a chilling finality. You have no need for more. When Hunter's small hand reached for the syrup, she sharply slapped it away. The sound was faint, but the impact was utterly devastating. Do not be so greedy, she hissed, just as Emily entered with a tray of juice. Emily's eyes immediately darted toward the children's meager portions. Mrs. Thompson, she began, perhaps the little ones? Enough, Olivia said, silencing her with a glare. I am tired of your unsolicited advice. Emily's voice remained calm, yet it was laced with firm resolve. They are just children, ma'am. They need to eat properly. Olivia slammed her coffee cup onto the table with a crack. Are you presuming to tell me how to manage my own household? No, but leave. Immediately. The color drained from Emily's face. Ma'am, I beg you, out. The maid took a slow step back, her knuckles white as she clutched the tray. Tears began to well in Sophie's eyes as she saw the only adult who had ever shown her kindness being forced to walk away. Jackson could feel his own heart hammering against his chest. This was the final straw. Olivia was truly coming apart at the seams. That evening, he sat in his dimly lit motel room with the small recorder, listening to the playback of her voice on a loop. Every cruel word, every bitter insult was now permanently preserved. He knew the very next day, he decided, would bring this entire nightmare to an end. Saturday morning dawned with the tension of a gathering storm, one just waiting to break. Jackson had positioned himself before sunrise, concealed by the shadows of the garden path. From inside, Olivia was in the kitchen, orchestrating preparations for another one of her ladies' luncheons. He could overhear her speaking on the phone, her voice coated in a sickeningly sweet cheerfulness. Yes, do come by noon. I simply must show you how wonderfully the children have improved. Her words made his stomach clench. She was planning to parade them like show ponies again, a display of their engineered obedience. a performance fueled by their fear. As the clock struck noon, 3 women arrived, their superficial laughter echoing through the cold marble halls. Jackson stayed near the terrace, pretending to work, meticulously trimming hedges that were already flawless. He had to remain close. "Children," Olivia's voice, Asua, sliced through the air. "Come downstairs now." Sophie appeared first, a fragile vision in a pale blue dress. Hunter followed, a small boy lost inside a miniature suit. Both of them looked utterly exhausted. "Manners," Olivia warned in a low hiss. "Good afternoon, ladies," Sophie recited, her voice barely a whisper. "Good afternoon," the women chirped back, their smiles a little too wide. "They're just adorable," one of them gushed. "You've worked wonders with them." "Oh, a little discipline makes all the difference in the world," Olivia replied, beaming with a chilling sort of pride. "They were once so wild. Now look at them. Absolutely perfect." Jackson's hands shook, the shears biting into another branch. Perfect. The word hung in the air like a poison. They were like perfect little puppets on a string. Then, just moments later, young Sophie, thirsty, simply reached for a glass of water. But her small hand lost its grip, and the glass exploded against the tile floor. An immediate, deafening silence fell over the room. Her mother's voice sliced through the quiet. "Look at the mess you've made." It was pure venom. I'm so sorry," Sophie whispered, her voice barely audible. "Sorry," Olivia sneered, "doesn't fix a thing." A tide of crimson washed over Olivia's face as she raised her hand to strike. Jackson instinctively moved, taking a single step forward. But before he could close the distance, Emily burst from the doorway. "Stop!" she commanded, placing herself between mother and child. The slap meant for Sophie struck Emily instead, the sharp crack of it echoing across the silent terrace. She staggered back, a fiery red handprint already blooming on her cheek. For a moment, Olivia was frozen in shock, her eyes burning with fury. "How dare you?" Emily shot back. "I will not let you lay a hand on her." Her voice trembled with adrenaline, but her words were unwavering. "She's only 6 years old. She's just a little girl." "Then you're fired." Olivia spat the words out. "And I will personally see to it that you never find work again." "Do whatever you feel you must," Emily replied, her gaze locked on Olivia. "But you will not touch that child." The 3 guests were paralyzed, caught in the crossfire, completely uncertain if they should step in or flee. Jackson felt his own heart hammering against his ribs. This was the moment. He let the shears fall to the ground and strode forward. "That is enough." Every head in the room snapped toward him. Olivia's burning rage curdled into pure disgust. "And you? What do you think you're doing here? Get back to your work." But Jackson stood taller. His voice, when he spoke, was perfectly calm. A lethally calm. "I said, that is quite enough." There was an edge to his voice that made the women exchange uneasy glances. Olivia's bravado cracked. "Who in the world do you think you are?" Slowly, Jackson raised a hand to his face, peeling the phony beard from his jawline. It was as if all the air had been sucked from the room. First came a wave of confusion, then a tide of pure horror. One of the women let out a sharp gasp. Jackson Thompson. Olivia reeled back as if struck. "No, that's impossible." He let the disguise drift from his fingers to the floor. Surprise. For several heart-stopping seconds, nobody dared to move. The entire world appeared to grind to a halt, the air thick with tension, the silence utterly unbearable. Olivia's eyes were fixed on Jackson, her expression one of someone staring at a specter from the grave. Her lips trembled and parted, but no words would form. You're supposed to be in New York." "I was supposed to be many things," Jackson replied, his voice dangerously low. "A husband, a father, and a blind fool who never saw the viper he'd welcomed into his own home." Emily was rooted to the spot, one hand pressed against her stinging cheek. Sophie clung desperately to her waist, trembling uncontrollably. Hunter whimpered softly in her arms. "Jackson," Olivia stammered, forcing a laugh that was thin and cracked like glass. "This is not what it appears to be." "Oh, I'm quite certain it's precisely what it looks like," he countered, his tone laced with ice. "I've been here all along, Olivia. I was watching, listening, and documenting everything." The blood drained from her face. You were recording me?" "Every last word," Jackson stated coldly, revealing the small digital recorder he held in his hand. "Every vile insult, every single threat, and every time your actions brought my children to tears." The guests began to exchange looks of pure horror. One of them whispered, "Perhaps we should leave." But Jackson's firm voice stopped them in their tracks. "No. Stay. You all came here to witness my perfect family. Isn't that right? So you will stay and witness the truth." With that, Olivia's composure completely shattered. "You deceived me," she screamed, her voice ragged. "You spied on me like I was a common criminal." "I placed my children in your trust," Jackson countered, his voice cracking with emotion for a moment before hardening into steel. "And you shattered them." He turned to Sophie and Hunter, kneeling down to meet their eyes. "It's finally over now," he whispered softly. "Nobody is ever going to harm you again." Sophie's small arms instantly wrapped around his neck, her sobs muffled against his shoulder. Hunter's tiny hands clutched his shirt, refusing to let go. Emily looked away, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "You were their father, this whole time?" Jackson met her stunned gaze. "Yes. I needed to know what was going on when I wasn't around." Her lips trembled as the realization dawned. "And you saw all of it." "I did." he confirmed gently. And you? You were the one beacon of light in this entire house. Olivia's voice sliced through the tension, sharp as a razor. Oh, spare me the theatrics of trying to paint her as some kind of saint. She's been playing you for a fool, just like she has everyone else. Jackson rose to his feet, his posture unyielding. The only person manipulating anyone here has been you. He then pressed play on the recorder. Olivia's own voice, cruel and undeniable, echoed through the room. Fear is a much better motivator than love. Love just makes children soft. A collective gasp rippled through the women present. One of them recoiled, shaking her head in utter disbelief. Olivia lunged for the device, hissing, "Turn that off!" Jackson took a measured step back, just out of her reach. "Touch me again, and I will personally ensure every attorney in California hears this." For the very first time, a flicker of genuine fear showed in her eyes. "Jackson, please," she begged, her voice finally cracking. "We can work through this. I can get help. Therapy." "No," he cut her off sharply. "You are finished here. My lawyer is already drafting the divorce papers as we speak. You will pack your belongings and be out of this house by day's end. And you will never lay eyes on these children again." Her features contorted into a mask of pure rage. "You can't take them from me," she shrieked. "They were never yours to take." Emily flinched as Olivia lunged forward once more, but Jackson's hand shot out, catching her wrist in mid-swing. His voice dropped to a whisper that was colder than the marble floor beneath their feet. "If you ever touch her, or my children, again, and you will plead for the very mercy you denied them." Olivia violently yanked her arm from his grasp, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "You are going to regret this. My only regret is the day I married you," he stated flatly. Her eyes darted around, taking in the shocked faces of the guests and the silent judgment of the staff, and the opulent house that was, in an instant, no longer her home. With a final, venomous glare, she spun around and stormed towards the grand entrance, the sharp crack of her heels on the marble floor echoing like pistol shots. As the sound of her retreat faded, an unnerving silence descended upon the room. For what felt like an eternity, nobody dared to move. Then, it was Sophie's tiny, trembling voice that shattered the stillness. "Daddy? Is she really gone?" she whispered. "Yes, my sweetheart," Jackson murmured, pulling her into a tight, protective embrace. "She's gone for good." Emily knelt down beside them, her gentle hand reaching up to wipe a tear from Sophie's cheek. "You're safe now, my love." At that moment, Hunter reached out, lightly tugging on Emily's sleeve, as if in unspoken acknowledgement that he knew she was the one who had been their guardian all this time. Jackson's gaze fell upon her, and for the first time, he truly saw her, seeing everything about her he had been blind to before. He saw the truth he had refused to let himself see. Her incredible strength, her boundless compassion, and her unwavering love. "You saved them," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Emily gently shook her head. "I only did what any decent person should have." "No," he insisted, his voice firm. "You did what I was too weak to do." For a fleeting moment, their gazes locked, an inter-conversation passing between them, one of unspoken gratitude and an undeniable connection, before Emily finally looked away. "But you lied to me," she stated, her voice barely a whisper, "about who you really were, about this entire deception." "I know," Jackson conceded, his voice thick with regret, "and I despise myself for it. But I swear to you, every single word I said as Robert, everything about respect, everything about family, it was all true." Tears began to cloud her vision. "I don't know if I can ever believe you." "You don't have to," he said softly. "Just understand this. You will never again have to answer to a person like her. I will personally guarantee it." A faint, bittersweet smile touched Emily's lips. "That isn't what I wanted. Mr. Thompson." He paused, caught off guard. "Then what was it you wanted?" "To see those children truly smile again," she replied with simple honesty. Jackson turned his gaze toward Sophie and Hunter. Sophie had drifted off to sleep against his chest, her small hand tightly gripping the fabric of his shirt. Hunter, nestled securely in Emily's lap, was finally breathing the calm, even breaths of a child at peace. For the first time in weeks, a quiet stillness filled the mansion. It wasn't the chilling, fearful silence that Olivia had cultivated, but a tranquility that could only come from feeling safe. Jackson finally exhaled, the crushing weight of all he'd witnessed and endured bearing down on him. "It's finally over," he whispered. Emily nodded in agreement. "For them, it might be. But for you, it's not over yet." He glanced over at her, his expression puzzled. "You have to find a way to forgive yourself," she said with gentle resolve. "Your only intention was to protect them. Don't allow guilt to rob you of this moment." Jackson's gaze fell upon his children, their features finally settled